Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey. I'm a holistic health and nutrition coach, and really my goal is just to give you the tools that you need to live a nourishing and fulfilled life when it comes to your whole body health. I'm so passionate about it, and what I love about this podcast is that I have an outlet to do this, and I have people that listen, which is just crazy to me. But it's been so fun, and I look forward to this every week. So I just wanted to check in with you, ask how you're doing on this Wednesday or whenever you're listening to this episode. For me, this last week has been honestly super exciting and fun. But for you, if this week has been maybe harder than others, I just want you to rest assured that things will get better. I know. And I'm going to talk about this when I talk about how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit. But I am queen of trying to control every area of my life. And that is something I have worked really at the start of the new year to give up. And it's not easy, but I'm going to dive into that. But before I do that, I wanted to just ask, if you haven't yet, if you could just leave a rating or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I would really appreciate it. If you leave a review, let me know, screenshot it, and you will get entered into the giveaway for 2024. I also wanted to let you know that the podcast is now on YouTube, which is super fun. I love YouTube. It might be nerdy. I always feel a little hesitant to tell people that. I don't know why. I just feel like it's kind of maybe not the norm, but you can now upload podcasts to YouTube. And so there's no video yet. I have thought about doing that, but just audio if you want to listen over there, or maybe you're listening on YouTube right now. Welcome. I'm so glad that I now have another platform to share the podcast on. Okay, so today we are getting into part 3 of 4 for the Core 4 method. The last 2 weeks I did starchy carbs. Last week and the week before that, I did protein. This week, we are talking about healthy fats. This is one I am so excited to dive into because, of course, I geek out over these things and love talking about food. But really, it's an area that I think we neglect so often. And it's most of us, I would say, probably are not getting enough healthy fats in our diet. So I'm going to dive into, why you need them, what aren't healthy fats, and different ways you can cook with them or incorporate them into your diet. But before I do that, let's catch up a little bit. This last week, I ordered all of my vegetable seeds from my garden. I had some from last year. So this is something I learned. I thought every year you needed to get new seeds. Again, I'm very new to the whole gardening scene. I'm in no way a master gardener yet. But I learned that you can reuse seeds, which is super exciting because I really just had to buy a few, I think maybe 6 varieties. I got some more cucumbers. I got colorful carrots and beets because I want to do some pickled beets this year. My grandma did that this last year and they were so darn good. I'm like, I need to plant beets this year because I really want to make some more pickled beets. What else? Really, when it comes to vegetables, I also know I'm going to get some potatoes and onions, but I tried to start onions from seed last year and they were just so skinny and pathetic. I'm like, I'm just going to buy onions from somebody who's already started them from seed. So I'm really just starting from seed my Brussels sprouts, all of my tomato varieties, my peppers, and my eggplants. And then everything else I'm going to direct sow. So starting from seed means I will start that in my basement actually with some grow lights. And honestly, just talking about this makes me so excited. I shouldn't say never, but until I really got into food and high quality food, I wouldn't have thought that this would just make me so excited to talk about, but it does. Because it's just so important to me that I have high quality food, and it's just a fun thing to do in the summer to put your energy into. And so, like I was saying, starting from seed, I will start little sprouted plants from those varieties I mentioned. And then everything else I will plant in May, around May. My dad made me some raised garden beds. And so they're like 4 foot by 10 foot, and he made me 4 of them. And I have a perfect little spot by our horse barn that I'm going to have my garden all set up, and I can just picture it now, and it makes me so happy. But so then everything that I direct sow will go directly into those garden beds. So I don't need to start them from seed. So they'll just sprout in the ground. So direct sow that's what that is called. And I explain all of that just because if you're even interested in gardening or starting something, I personally knew so little, and I relied a lot on my friend Emily and my grandma and grandpa and my other grandma to really educate me on what this whole process should look like, because I was so scared I would do so many things wrong. I was even planning out like what I would direct sow, what I would start from seed, and it took me maybe 10 minutes. But last year I remember like trying to get so calculated, like, well, I'm supposed to start this after the first or after the last frost. And then I'd be like, well, when is that? And then I would kind of panic and not really know what that meant. This year, I just feel like it's a lot more comfortable. I actually have faith that when I plant something in the ground, something is going to grow, which I did not have last year. I had the faith of a mustard seed, I would say. And it put it into perspective, like how the farmers in the area, and they probably are just anxious and worried until they see a seed prop or a little sprout pop out of the ground. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I have not small, but I don't have a big area that I'm planting these things. And I was stressed that nothing would grow. So now I have faith that things will grow if you plant them. My grandma always tells me, if you plant things, they want to grow. So don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. So that's just really exciting. But what I am most excited about, can you tell I'm very excited? I've said that about 6 times, but I got flowers that I'm planting this year, and I went overboard. I was telling somebody yesterday, I go into a frenzy and I literally just can't help it because I see all these beautiful flowers. I'm like, yep, I want to grow all of these. And so I think I got 13 different varieties of flowers and some like eucalyptus and filler plants. And I'm having a gal out from, if you're in the Lincoln area, you probably know what the Harvest Home is, but I'm going to have Jamie, and she and her husband kind of run that farm. I'm going to have her out to help me kind of set up my flower growing area, because I would definitely love to expand. And my dream is to have like a you-pick flower, like weekly, people can come and pick their own bouquets. Like, just a dream. I know I have lots of dreams. If you're listening, you're probably like, okay, she is overly ambitious, which I know. And I tell Nate all the time, I'm like, people probably think I'm crazy that I have all these dreams, but like in my mind, it's all a reality. And maybe that's delusion talking, but like in my mind, all of this can happen, and it's not outside of the realm of my ability. Maybe it's overly confident, maybe it's delusional. I don't really care, because I just have so much fun doing all of this and planning it all out. So I'm really excited to hopefully add flowers into what I'm growing this year. It does make me a little bit nervous, but I'm sure similar to like vegetables, it will next year then feel like nothing to worry about, because I'll already have 1 year kind of under my belt. But that is really the peak probably of my week, was just getting those seeds ordered. I also got some herbs that I'm going to grow. If you've been listening, you know I'm taking an herbalism class, and I geek out over herbs now. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know who I am. But anyway, so I got some chamomile, some holy basil, and purple coneflower. And those are herbs that I'm going to then grow this year. And I'm excited because then I can dry them and put them into different tinctures or make different tea blends with other herbs that I source. So that is just something I, of course, am looking forward to as well. Outside of that, I did have a Galentine's Day party this last weekend. It was at my friend Taylor's house, and it's so funny because Taylor, I feel like, has so many friends. And so I'm like, I never know what arrangement of people are going to be there, but it's always a new group. And that's what's really fun. You get to meet different people, talk to different people. So yeah, it was a really good time. We made like shower, what do you call them? Like eucalyptus bouquets that you like hang in your shower. So they smell really, really good. And then we also made these vision boards. And of course, my vision board, it had like a greenhouse and chickens and a mini cow and like camping and just all of these things where I'm like, yeah, you can tell what's on my brain about 98% of the time just by looking at this board. There's also like sourdough on there, different breads, a plate wall. And so that plate wall actually, and this is what I think is so cool about having a vision for what you want your next year to look like, is then my mom came over this weekend and we hung up a plate wall of plates I had been collecting, some that she had. And it's just really cool when you look back at what you visualized for your year and to see things align so naturally, really. All of these things that have kind of been evolving over the last month and a half, which I know we're only in February, but the things that have just been happening are already aligning so closely to what I want this year to look like. And I just really love to have something to reference, and for me, it inspires me to have something to look forward to accomplishing, or to have just that vision board to look at, period, because it's the background on my desktop of my computer, and it's also the background on my iPhone. And so it's just something I'm always looking at, and so it's always on the forefront of my mind, and it makes me just feel like it's actually possible to do all of these things that I have dreamt of doing for years. And I just think that's really cool. And even if that doesn't happen, I'm sure, if you do this, you're going to make strides towards them in one way or another. Doesn't mean everything on your vision board or what you've kind of curated your year to look like has to happen. But when you just naturally let things happen and flow and don't try to control too much or hold on to things, I've really noticed that things just naturally evolve in a way that is so much better than you could have imagined. And I know that sounds cheesy and it sounds corny, but I really, like I had mentioned, am such a controller. Like, I love to control situations. I just really struggled with that. And so I realized that just by letting things happen, so much more can come out of something if you just let other people let things change and evolve. And that is really how I am nourishing my mind right now. I'm just being patient about what's going on and not trying to force things. And of course, you can't just I always think you can't just sit there and wait for things to happen. But what you can do is you can do small things every day that then lead to big changes. For example, when I think about clients, right? I have a job where I kind of need clients to keep my business rolling. And what I've realized is that the more maybe desperate I feel to have clients, and this is not so much right now. I would say this was me definitely a year ago when I was just starting one-on-one coaching. I'm like, who would want to work with me? I don't know. And then I ended up getting clients, and then that just grew and it grew. And now I'm at a point where it's like, I am not desperate for that. And I think when you give up that sense of needing to have control over gaining more clients or growing your business, and you just let it happen, things happen so much more organically. Opportunities come up more organically. Something I'm doing, and this is, I know I've mentioned this before, but I really am just trying to get into my community and into different communities, honestly, and connect with people. I, in the past, had worked with coaches who were really big on the social media side of things, of really trying to push programs in your work on social media because it's really a free marketing platform. And although, yes, that's a part of what I do, I'm also a part of a Rise group in Lincoln. And so I coach a group, and this will be in the summer, of women in the community through a group coaching program. That's a way I've done that. Through that, I've also connected with so many other coaches that are in different areas, but all in Lincoln. And it's just kind of that networking, right? I could refer people to them. They could refer people to me, but it's so much more than that, right? It's not just doing it for the referral. It's doing it to have a genuine human connection. And that's just something social media can't provide. Another thing I'm doing that I'm kind of planning for is I'm setting up at the home show, which I guess I don't know why it's called that, but the home show, it's like all these businesses set up and you have a booth and people can come talk to you. And so I'm just kind of thinking through what I want that to look like so I can create interactions with people and people want to come to the booth and talk to me and see what I'm doing. And so having things like that where you are a real human and you're talking to other real humans, and not that social media isn't real people, it just doesn't always feel as genuine. And so I really want to just cultivate genuine connection. And that's what this year has done for me. And because that's been a goal of mine, and I just took one small step kind of at the beginning of last year towards becoming a Rise coach. Now opportunities have come up where I have other speaking events that I can do, or I've reached out to my church and I spoke to women there, or, just little things. Because that is such a goal of mine, I'm not forcing it. But if people ask what I'm doing, or if I see an organization that I would love to come connect with and talk to about not just what I'm doing, but also how they can heal their body, right? Because I don't want it to be obviously about me and about what I'm doing, but how through what I know and what I'm doing, I can help other people then feel their best and heal their bodies with food and with kind of that whole body approach. So that's just something, I guess, an example of how I'm just trying to let things naturally evolve. Even sharing about this on the podcast. Maybe there's, if you're listening and you're like, I have an organization or I have a company that I'd love for you to come and talk to us about stress management and creating an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. That's kind of probably the biggest speaking topic that I do, is just that stress and anti-inflammatory lifestyle, creating a balanced plate, but it's just like when you put things out and you just say things openly, even though maybe nothing will come of it, I just feel like things can naturally occur, which is just really cool to see. And it's kind of that fine balance of not sharing all of your hopes and dreams, right? Because I think that's something I'm kind of probably an oversharer, where people listen to maybe my dreams and they're like, you're overly ambitious. Maybe you shouldn't be so confident in your, saying all of these things. But there's things that I don't share, obviously, that I'm working on, but like I was saying, it's that fine balance of like sharing so people know that you're open to these opportunities, but also keeping some things to yourself, which I think is equally as important. But if you're somebody who's like, okay, I really want this area of my life to expand, like just start sharing it with people very organically, not forcing it, not feeling like you have to have any pressure around it, but just letting things happen how they're supposed to happen, but putting effort towards it so things do change. Like I was saying, you can't just sit around and wait for things to change. You do have to instigate it, but then from there, seeing where things go. So a long-winded way of saying that is how I'm nourishing my mind right now. How I'm nourishing my body is I had been incorporating a sauna post-workout. And something that I need to get better at is post-workout recovery. I've been talking a lot about how I'm lifting heavier weight these days, really trying to build muscle. But when I come home, I'll eat breakfast. But I really feel like adding in a protein shake in the afternoon, or like a clean protein, which I need to order, or like creatine before or after my workout would be something that would be really good for my body to help with recovery. So of course, utilizing the sauna is one way to do that, but that's an area I really just want to dive more into, is actually really, really prioritizing the recovery side of things. So I'm going to keep doing the sauna, but outside of that, I do need to get better at other areas of my recovery process. And then how I'm nourishing my spirit is this morning, I finally got back into doing my devotional and reading a chapter of the Bible. That's something I was doing very consistently for a couple of weeks, and it truly changed the way I felt. That's not to say I always maybe wanted to do it or had that desire, but it's just actively seeking out that time with God and prioritizing it. And that is something that can be really, I just think for me, I'm okay, let me get into my day. By the time we get home from the gym and get ready for the day, it's almost 9:00 and I'm like, okay, I'm wasting time. But really, what is 5 minutes to read a devotional and read your Bible or journal about it? And that's not to say it always has to be that, but for me, I notice that is when I feel the best. I notice, like I was saying, things just happen that I didn't really plan on happening in a good way. And that's not to say that that is the sole reason, right? I try to add in different spiritual practices throughout the day as well, but just having that habit, I think just shows myself that it's a priority, shows God that he's a priority, and I can actively seek that time with him rather than just going on with my day and then thinking I'll probably do it, but then I end up not. So that's something I've been today was my first day adding it back in probably a week and a half, but really proud of myself for doing that. And most of all, I just want to make sure that that stays consistently a part of my routine. Okay, 20 minutes in, we're finally getting into the bulk of today's episode. I know these intros have been a little bit longer, but I think when I'm talking about something so sometimes scientifically heavy, I like to also give that human side of me and just share about what's going on. And I personally love that part about podcasts is like listening to the full catch up. I want to get to know who I'm listening to. So hopefully that just makes you know me a little bit better, or at least fills you in on what's going on in my life. But let's get into it. So we're talking about healthy fats. Like I had said, this is part 3 of 4. In regards to the Core 4 method. And that is a method that I created to really help people identify what a balanced plate should look like most of the time, right? Not to say you always need to be perfect, but when I think about building a plate, it consists of these 4 things. We've got a starchy carb, a protein, fiber in the form of a fruit or vegetable, and healthy fats. So next week, we will be talking about fiber in the form of a fruit or vegetable. But if you want to go back and listen to the last 2 episodes I recorded, they are on the starchy carbs and on protein. Today, moving into healthy fats. I wanted to start by just identifying what aren't healthy fats. So what isn't a healthy fat? That would be a fat that contains a lot of those omega-6 fatty acids. So those really promote inflammation. And although, yes, our body can have some, it doesn't mean we should primarily be consuming omega-6 fatty acids. So what products contain that? Canola oil is that first oil that I always say is highly inflammatory because it's highly refined. So this means that it's heated up and then chemicals are used to extract the oil. And then because that like sludge, it really is sludge. You should look up how they make canola oil. That sludge then is bleached and they make it the color it is today, right? That you would see on the shelf. So I really, really try to remove these oils from my diet just because I know they are the cause of a lot of inflammation. So outside of canola oil, this could also be soybean oil, vegetable oil, rapeseed oil, which is another form of actually the same product that canola oil is. Those are kind of the same. They're just manufactured a little bit differently in some cases, but kind of interchangeable in my mind. And then there's sunflower oil. And sunflower oil, it kind of depends. This is one, if you buy a lot of those more like health food, processed foods, and you, like I think of like Siete Foods, they've got tortilla chips, but I believe they use a sunflower oil, like an organic sunflower oil. In my mind, that is a less inflammatory oil. It's more as if you were to look at a package and the first ingredient was canola oil, the second was soybean oil, the third was sunflower oil. I would say, okay, if they're adding in all 3 of those oils together, probably not a product we want to be consuming if you're watching inflammation markers. And so sunflower oil, again, it's not one that I really, really hyper focus on in my food. It's just one I like to mention as it can be inflammatory, but of course you're looking at the quality of the product. If it's a high quality product and there's sunflower oil, I'd be less concerned than if it was a low quality processed product that then had a bunch of those other oils in it. So I also wanted to answer questions that I most commonly get from clients or from people on Instagram. So this question is one that maybe is a little controversial, but does organic mean that it's better for you? So when we're talking about those non-healthy fats, if you were to look at the label and it was like organic canola oil, would that be a healthier version for you? And then I would say in some cases, maybe. However, unless you are manufacturing that product yourself, which I would say most of us probably aren't, it's really hard to know where the source of that product is coming from, how it was grown, how it was manufactured, how it was processed, and then packaged. If you look at those products, they're also packaged in plastic. If I'm going to buy an oil, I want to make sure it's in glass. With the exception of coconut oil, I buy it in a huge tub, so that is in plastic. But I would want any of those oils that I'm going to be buying, and I'll mention them further on, in glass. And I also just tend to remove these inflammatory oils altogether from my diet because you can replace them with products that are so much better. They taste so much better, they make you feel so much better, and they're actually health supporting rather than like health deteriorating is what I would say. So another question, and I say this because of a little backstory. I worked at a hospital in the heart and cardiovascular area, and I was a personal trainer there, and I did some stretching classes. I didn't do nutrition because I'm not a dietitian, and that is all that hospitals really tend to employ is certified like dietitians or nutritionists. And so they did this program called Pritikin, and in the Pritikin diet, they recommend a canola or vegetable oil for the heart patients. And I remember I was sitting in the classroom where they watched these videos, and afterwards, the dietitian had left, and one of them had come up to me, and they're like, I really love to put coconut oil, which is a healthy fat, on my popcorn. Is that bad? Should I be switching towards canola oil? And of course, I mean, it's not a bad thing that I told her this, but it wasn't within the realm that I probably should have because I wasn't the dietitian. But I was like, honestly, I would say that coconut oil is going to be better for you than canola oil, so I would really stick with the coconut oil. And it was just a way for me to reassure that patient that honestly, I don't agree with that statement. And so was I trying to contradict the video? No, but I also didn't want this poor lady to be living in so much fear because she put coconut oil on her popcorn instead of canola oil, when in my opinion, in my view of food, she really should have been using the coconut oil over canola oil anyway. And so this question, let me just read it out to you. It says, I have a heart condition and am a type 2 diabetic. Why did my dietitian recommend I use canola and vegetable oil? And the reason that I believe they do this in those environments is because they promote a diet low in saturated fats and cholesterol. And so if you are really just studying the old research, they're going to tell you that saturated fats are the cause of heart disease. So this would be like your butter, your ghee, bacon, cheese, and eggs. But if you look at studies after 2010, which this is really not new research, it just has not been prevalent in those environments, I think. And they then, in those studies, will tell you that nutrient-dense foods, so that's including dairy and unprocessed meats, can actually help decrease the risk of your cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes, malnutrition, and deficiencies among groups that would be considered at risk. So if you're pre-diabetic, or if you had maybe a scare with your heart, but it wasn't anything extreme like a heart attack or a stroke. And they really started telling patients to avoid saturated fats and high cholesterol foods, in my opinion, because it's easier than telling them that whole scientific background of why they are saying those fats are better for you. And it's really not aligning with the new research we have that says, okay, eggs and butter are not the cause of your heart disease. And so really, when you're told to eliminate those coconut oils or your butters or your ghees, it's just a way for them to also have you eat a diet that contains less highly processed foods. And that's my goal too. Like, we're kind of on the same track, but just thinking of it in a different way. They tell you to avoid other oils because it means you're probably going to eat maybe less highly processed foods or be just more aware of what you're putting in your body. And I think awareness is a big thing. You're just aware. But for me, I'm going to push those other oils, the healthy oils that I'm about to talk about, because I don't think it's the fat that is the issue. I think it's the processing of the foods that is the issue. And so when they do that in the hospital setting, this is not a diss to hospitals or dietitians, because I'm sure many different dietitians all have different opinions on this. But in that own example, right, I was in a hospital and they were still practicing that the canola and soybean and vegetable oil should be your primary oil. And those are the oils that cause inflammation. So in my mind, yes, maybe they are lower in saturated fats and cholesterol. They're highly inflammatory. And if you have an inflammatory disease of the heart, I would want to minimize the amount of inflammatory oils that you're using altogether, regardless of if they're high or low in saturated fats or cholesterol. And so let's talk about what healthy fats are. So healthy fats contain omega-3s. So if you think about those inflammatory fats, they contain omega-6 fatty acids. The healthy fats contain omega-3 fatty acids. So you're going to find this in products like your chia seeds, hemp hearts, raw nuts or dry roasted nuts, fatty fish, avocados, eggs, olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, grass-fed butter, coconut oil, cheese, full-fat yogurt, milk, and beef tallow. These are healthy fats. These are what we want to add more of into our diet because our body really utilizes those omega-3 fatty acids, and they're really, really good for supporting our brain. So let's talk about why you need these on your plate. So our brain is 60% fat. So if I have clients that are really struggling with memory loss, brain fog, headaches, or dizziness, I really try to push consuming more fat than they usually do, healthy fats. Those omega-3 fats have been linked to reducing symptoms of depression as well, which really shows you that you truly can't look at, a disease and solely just target that disease. You have to look at the bigger picture. Because if I was to work with a client that has brain fog, I might be thinking if I was more of I shouldn't say medically minded because I think this would be an extreme example, but if they have brain fog or memory loss, I might immediately link it to Alzheimer's disease, or maybe they have like a tumor or something that's causing them to have a memory loss at a young age. And although, yes, of course, they need to check in with their doctor, they need to make sure everything is good from a structural standpoint. What I'm going to do as somebody who is giving them foods to nourish their body and mind is I'm going to then push the healthy fats. And if this is somebody, especially that then struggles with depression, I would link those two. Okay, memory loss and depression. We're looking at their mental health and their physical health. So there's a physical symptom of memory loss, but there's that mindset symptom of depression. So let's push the healthy fats. Let's see if we notice any minimization in their inflammation markers for for brain and nervous system. And that's something I can track. We do an inflammation assessment that allows us to track their numbers based off of a series of questions to see if then their inflammation is decreasing as we start to add in more healthy fats. So again, that whole body focus is just so crucial in my eyes, in my opinion. But fats also give you energy and they help your body absorb the other nutrients in your food. So if we think about our plate and if we're eating everything but the healthy fat, your body is not going to absorb the nutrients in your other foods that you're consuming if you're not consuming a healthy fat. It just helps with that nutrient absorption. And our bodies also need fat to keep us warm, right? It's kind of an insulator, but it also protects our organs. So I think for so long, I feared fat and I feared all types of fat. I thought that fat was fat. I didn't really know at that time that healthy fat and more inflammatory fats were different. So if I would have added in more healthy fats, I would have felt a lot better. I would have had more energy, better focus, rather than thinking I should avoid them because that healthy fat would immediately turn into fat storage in my body, which isn't the case. So I want to reassure you, if you're somebody who's like, okay, but I buy fat-free because I don't want to gain weight, I would so much rather have you buy full fat products than fat-free, because you can't just take a fat out of a product without filling it in with something. And typically what they're filling it in with is the fake sugars or natural flavors or all of these fillers that they use so they can label something as fat-free when really it just contains a bunch of other products that are worse for you than the fat itself, if that makes sense. So fat-free is not always the best option. And in that instance too, just remembering that fat doesn't equal fat storage. So you eating fat doesn't mean that is going to turn into fat in your body. It's actually really good for energy production, like I said, and for that mind. A lot of the time with patients, and there's been new studies out, and I truly need to do much more research and reading on this to confidently say this is 100%, but they were tracking patients that have Alzheimer's, and they started adding in a very fat-focused diet. So they gave them a lot of healthy fats, of course, mixed in a balanced plate. And they noticed that although, no, there's not a specific cure to Alzheimer's, they noticed that their symptoms started improving, right? They felt better. Their memory was better. They could retain information for a little bit longer. And again, do not 100% quote me on that, but that is just a blip of a study that I had briefly read through. And I thought it was so fascinating that fat truly has the power to alter and improve our minds. And of course, mind and body and spirit is such a huge focus of me. So I always want to bring in how it can also improve factors outside of just your physical health, but your mental health. Okay, so another question that I get is, should I fear fats? And I really just talked about this, is no way, right? In my history of tracking food and tracking calories, trying to eat around 1,200 calories a day, which is very, very low. Fat typically are the highest in calories per serving. So if you look at a fourth cup of nuts, it's going to be a lot more than if you look at a fourth cup of crackers. But there are components of the fat that are crucial for your health. And when we are taught solely to look at the calories of something, that's when we start to label foods as good and bad. And in my eyes, and what I teach my clients to do, is look at the ingredients of the food and then evaluate if it is health supporting or not, right? So not just looking at calories and thinking, oh, if I have nuts for a snack and maybe some crackers and a beef stick, like that's a really high calorie snack. But we need to look past the calories and look at the nutritional benefit that it's giving your body. So balancing out that plate, again, I will say that over and over again, the core four, focusing on adding in those components is going to help you physically feel your best. So no, you should not fear fat, not fear healthy fats. You also shouldn't fear those inflammatory fats or those inflammatory oils, like I mentioned with the canola, the soybean, the vegetable. I recognize this in myself. I'm a pretty, I would say, extreme person where I'm either I'm all into doing something and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So if I'm not going to have any inflammatory oils, I'll make sure every product in my home doesn't contain inflammatory oils. And yes, that's not a bad way to think about things, but at the same time, if you start noticing that you're really restricting and you're not eating enough because you are avoiding all of those inflammatory oils and you're neglecting your body of food because of it, there's a couple of different things that I'll say is, first, just make sure you're eating enough. You don't need to be 100% perfect. You don't need to 100% remove all of those inflammatory oils from your diet, because I'm all about living a balanced lifestyle and finding, that 80-20 balance of doing what you can do for your health 80% or more of the time, but not neglecting the piece of cake or the ice cream or the cookies because there's a different oil in it than you maybe would make them with at home. I really think there's a lot of freedom that comes when we nourish our body well, but there's also a lot of freedom mentally that comes when we not indulge, but when we enjoy foods around us, regardless of what's in them. Again, it shouldn't be all the time, but it's really that restrictive mindset that we're trying to break, and viewing food as food and viewing it more as what foods are going to help my body heal and what foods might not. But that doesn't mean it's not going to help heal your mindset if you would have that cookie, right? And so thinking that through, the second thing is find foods then that don't have those inflammatory oils that are still very, very filling. And so if you notice a lot of the foods in your house have those inflammatory oils, I would encourage you not to throw them all away, because that would be a very extreme method of handling this, but work your way through them and add in supporting foods where you can. So if you have a lot of those inflammatory products in your house, balance them out with mixing in some veggies or some fruit or some healthy fats with them, and eat them in a way and go through them. So then when you do have those products for the most part out of your home, you can add in better for your health type of products. And I do grocery store navigation sessions with clients. It's something I love to do as we go shopping and we find those products that are anti-inflammatory, but still taste good. They're still processed in a way, but they're not as highly processed and they don't contain inflammatory ingredients. So that's just something I would encourage you to do is if it's not working with me, obviously you don't need to do that, but just do your own research. Look at different swaps you could make for even your peanut butter or your go-to crackers to enjoy food, but enjoy it in a way that is health supporting. So kind of what I wanted to fill in there as well, just because you don't need to be perfect and you don't need to throw everything away that has an inflammatory oil in it. Just think about how you're using it and try to balance it out with a product that isn't quite as inflammatory. Okay, so then lastly, how can you add these foods into your diet? So how can you add these into your daily plate? So I'm going to give a few of my favorite ways to do this. So the first one would be to do an avocado toast on sourdough with an egg or bacon on the side. I'm all about real bacon, like minimally processed, no natural flavors or anything added to it. But I love a good real bacon. I know other people will talk about having more lean bacon, which would be like a turkey bacon. Do what works best for you. I just like the real deal. So that's where I say a regular bacon with some avocado toast and maybe an egg and one slice of bacon. My second one would be overnight oats or oatmeal with 1 to 2 teaspoons of chia seeds, a raw nut blend, or hemp hearts. You could also do like a drizzle of peanut butter or almond butter, whatever you like on top of that. That's another great way to get that in. If you are making a smoothie, I wanted to add this in. If you notice that after you eat your smoothie, you're really bloated, it's probably because you didn't add in that healthy fat. I noticed this really significantly when I was kind of on a smoothie kick a couple summers ago. And I'm like, I just feel sick after I eat my smoothies. I also then added this in, I guess, when I was running this summer too. But even if your protein powder contains a pretty good amount of fat, I do recommend that you would add in either like a glob of a nut butter, so like peanut butter, almond butter, or add in those chia seeds or hemp hearts, because it just is really going to, again, make that smoothie, even if you can't visually see all the components, it's going to make it balanced. So you've got your protein powder, maybe you've added in a milk or a water, you've added in some fresh fruits, and then do a glob of that nut butter or something high in fat, healthy fats, because it's just going to help you feel better. And I think that's a tip I didn't know, and so I think it's important to mention as well. Okay, this I guess would be third one or fourth one would be to add hemp hearts into your pesto. So you can get hemp hearts, they're kind of a nutty flavor. I like them better than chia seeds because they don't really get stuck in your teeth like a chia seed would, but it has very similar nutritional benefits. And so I make a homemade pesto, but after I'm done blending together all the components of the pesto, I will then add hemp hearts. It just gives it, instead of doing like pine nuts, which I believe is typically in your pesto, I do hemp hearts just because honestly pine nuts are kind of expensive and hemp hearts aren't too bad. So that's kind of a swap I've started making. My fifth one would be to make fish 1 time a week. And our favorite way to make fish is to actually do salmon in the air fryer. You just put it on a piece of tin foil in the air fryer with some salt and pepper. You don't even need to put another oil on it, and it gets really crispy and flaky. And honestly, it's the best way, I think, to make salmon. And just by adding in like a fatty fish like salmon, I think that's kind of the most gradual way to get into consuming fish. I feel like you really either love fish or you hate it. Salmon is one I was a little hesitant about because I don't love fish, and I honestly had only ever had like fried fish sticks. But it was so good, and doing it in that way with the air fryer is so delicious. And so one of my favorite meals probably, and it's just getting, like I said, those omega-3 fats into your diet. You could also take an omega-3 supplement. I am a very big on supplementing, which is not really supplementing, but getting everything you need from food before you move into supplements. My natural progression would be get what you can from food, then move to herbs, and then move to supplements. So it's kind of that last hurrah, that last step would be then to try it out with the supplement. If you're still feeling like, okay, I'm not getting in enough fat during my day, adding in an omega-3 or a fish oil supplement could be a good next step for you. And then lastly, it would be to switch from a canola oil or an olive oil-based butter. If you consume Land O'Lakes products, you live in the Midwest, I can almost guarantee that you're using that canola oil butter with the red lid from Land O'Lakes, because I think that's the one butter I see in 90% of homes. And this is not me saying that judgmentally. I used that growing up until I learned I was lactose intolerant. What people love is that it's so spreadable. And I get it. I didn't know that this was a thing, but people get very passionate about their butter and the spreadability of their butter, especially men, which is very hilarious to me. Like, I'll go shopping with some women and they'll be like, well, my husband, I don't know if he can make that switch. We've been using Blue Bonnet or we've been using the Land O'Lakes canola oil kind because it spreads so easy. So I get it. I would recommend that Kerrygold's butter would be a great spreadable butter option. Maybe you need to set it out a little bit before supper time. Maybe set it out while you're making supper so it's a little more spreadable. But like a grass-fed butter or a ghee or a tallow are my 3 favorite ways to incorporate that oil into how I'm cooking. Because if you use a canola oil or an olive oil has a very low smoke point, so it can actually become acidic if you do it on like a stir fry or if you do it when you're sauteing something, because again, it has a low smoke point. So that's when making that switch to using butter in all of your pans when you're cooking, or ghee or tallow. Like I had mentioned, I love tallow. That can be a really great option for you. So I like to mention that just because I think a lot of the times we think we're doing the right thing by adding olive oil into all of our dishes on the stovetop. And although that is never my primary concern, if I'm working with a client and they're sharing how they prepare food, it's never something I'm going to nitpick or very much worry about when it comes to their health. But it's just something I think most people don't recognize or maybe don't know. So it's just something I wanted to also mention. If you are going to get something that is dairy-free, I do want to just note that ghee is not dairy-free, I shouldn't say that, but it's a clarified butter. So if you're lactose intolerant, it's a great option. And I just like to make that difference because you might be wondering, what's the difference then between a grass-fed butter and ghee? Well, ghee is clarified to a point where it doesn't upset your stomach. And I believe it doesn't contain lactose because it's clarified. And so for me, that is my go-to on sourdough. Number 1, it's just so good. It is so smooth. And if you're looking for a spreadable butter and you try the ones I've recommended or I have on my Smart Swaps list and you're like, yeah, these aren't working for me, try ghee by Fourth and Harmony, I believe is the name. I'm going to actually have it linked below. What I've actually done is I have an Amazon storefront that says shop with me. And in that whole storefront, if you order a lot of your groceries on Amazon, you can find all of the products that I recommend, that I personally buy. And I think for someone like me who lives in a more rural area, which Lincoln is only an hour drive, but still, that doesn't mean I always want to go buy it. I buy my ghee from Amazon, because sometimes you just can't get everything at your local grocery store or at Walmart. So I will actually link that, and then you'll find those butter options in the show notes or in the description of this episode, just so you can shop products that I'm talking about or that I recommend. But in conclusion, I know, of course, this series has been a little bit more science-based, and I hope you still feel like it's very comprehensible and you feel encouraged after you listen to this. I never want to instill fear in you and fear about food, because I've been through that whole fear of food journey and tracking food and tracking calories. And it's a really hard thing to get out of. And it's a really hard mindset to break. I know I've mentioned it so many times, but I could still look at any food and tell you, almost any food, and tell you how many calories are in it, just because of that habit that I had. And so I just really encourage you, as I'm talking about balancing your plate, creating a core 4 plate, just focus on the quality of your food more than anything. Your body is going to digest food differently based on the quality. So you could have a really low calorie food, but that doesn't mean it's better for your health than something higher in calories, which is typically going to be these healthier fats. Just think about adding one or more healthy fat onto each plate that you make or concoction you make if it's a smoothie, and you're truly going to notice significant changes in how you physically feel, which is why I just push that core 4 method so much, because it's so important that you're really getting those components into your plate. And something I didn't mention on last week's episode, but if you're somebody who, and I talked about a low carb diet last week, if you're somebody who weight loss really is your goal, and maybe for health reasons, or you would just feel better, I've been in that situation before. I get that. I went through a phase where I really kind of needed to lose weight. Like I had gained a lot of weight in college and it wasn't in a healthy way. And so I did want to lose weight. And so what I would encourage you to do, if that really is a goal of yours, is when I'm talking about a core 4 plate, yes, you should have all of those components. And I never want you to feel limited or restricted on that. But, and I mentioned this last week, eating that protein first on your plate and then adding in one source of a starchy carb. So I know, like, I guess this would be more so for my clients, but I have this meal prep guide and it's actually for sale on my website, but on the last page of it, it says choose or pick your plate. And so you pick one from each category: a starchy carb, a healthy fat, fiber in the form of a fruit or vegetable, and protein. If your goal is weight loss, I would recommend picking a very high in protein animal-based source if you are not vegan or vegetarian. Consuming that first because that's going to balance your blood sugar and it's going to keep you full. Then just adding in one form of carbs and maybe doing a half to 2/3 of a serving, not a full serving. Still getting in that starchy carb. We're not neglecting it because, like I'd mentioned, carbs are not the cause of weight gain, but they can be higher in calories, especially if you're eating a highly processed carb. So just doing maybe a little bit less than a serving of your carb, but then loading up the vegetables and the fruits and then enjoying that plate, right? Having that be your balanced plate. So maybe it's just the portion sizes that look a little differently for you if weight loss is your goal. But I did want to mention that because I've been thinking about that since last week's episode. And I, of course, don't ever want to make anybody feel shamed or embarrassed if they've done a low carb diet, because I have. And that's why I know that me making the claim that it works is true, but that's because you're neglecting an area that your body really, really needs. So don't neglect anything. Really just maybe do some smaller portions of them. Of any area, honestly, except for the fruits and vegetables. I'll say that's an area you could eat as much of those as you want. It's not going to be ever be the cause of a weight gain. But yeah, portion sizes could just look differently for you based off of your needs. And of course, that's something I can't give you a for sure answer on because I don't know your body and you specifically. But I just wanted to bring that to your awareness and talk a little bit about that too. All right, so we are coming to the end of today's episode. Some weeks am so bad about posting about the prayer requests, so I need to write a note of that so I can get your prayer requests for next week's episode. I forgot to do that this week, but I will close this in prayer, and then you can get on with the rest of your day. So, dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for whoever is listening to this episode. As always, I just hope they feel so encouraged and inspired as they leave this podcast, and that they just feel like this is doable, that taking a hold of their health, that eating a balanced plate, that nourishing their body with good food and nourishing their mind and nourishing their spirit is attainable. And it's something that they can do independently, and that they just have the trust in someone else if they need help outside of themselves, and that they're able to find that support system in that person if they need that. Lord, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for the warmer weather you're sending our way. I thank you for the sunshine. And I just ask that you continue to be with everyone. Keep them safe. Please just support them on their journey towards better health, and that they just really pursue you along this journey as well. And don't forget that that is also a huge, huge piece of nourishing their mind, their body, and their spirit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So if you're interested in following a life along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, TikTok, Lemonade, now on YouTube, or you can email me at findyourdivinepurpose.com. You can find an area to connect with me there. But throughout the week, I also wanted to make note that you can submit your prayer request throughout the whole week. So I created a section on my website, and it actually just sends an email to me with a prayer request. So if you look in the description of today's episode, you can find that. You can also find ways to connect with me, see more about my one-on-one coaching program, and my Amazon storefront if you want to shop all of the goods that I talk about in the Core 4 Method series episodes. So with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.